But I'm right down here, so it's comfortable.
Does it go whenever?
Yeah.
Hello. The day my father died, I was left confused and still am to this day. Seeing my father in a casket really hurt me to see him like that. Without him and my family at the house, it's like a ghost town looking for that time back with them. I can't help to relive memories and get sad because one, they aren't there to enjoy the memory with, and second, I just miss them so much. Times are difficult at home without the people we had there to not be there anymore. It's been getting harder for me to even be at the house and enjoy it, let alone live, and then call it my home. Especially when the house itself practically left itself. I really didn't express myself back in the day or talk about the problems I had with people normally, but having my family around was what got me through my days. My dad's smart-ass humor had really got me through my days and troubles. Through him, I learned to try not to take things so serious and or heavy, because at least for this time I've had without my family, it only gets worse unless you make it better. I've had to go through a lot of changes to be where I am at today in life. Some good, some bad, but all just taught me to go through it. Worst part about it is that it felt like no one was there to help through all this before or after, even though there were and probably were more people. But I can't blame them because they're probably just going through the same in their own way. Throughout the years, my mom as a woman did try her best to do her role as a mom while dealing with life itself. She tried being there for those who tried being there for her. She loves her family and friends very deeply, and to me, seems the reason why things led to how we sit today. From what I've seen, she loved my father deeply, which kind of explains the constant fights and such about the affair. I miss my father every day alongside with pops and moms. They are the ones who raised me, made and brought me to the world that we are here in today. My father, even though he was hurting, he still had a big heart. Even though he was a big drinker up to sobriety, he still tried to enjoy time with us and bring us to places where some dads with the same struggle don't bring their kids at all and or can't. Him being a firefighter and veteran brought some cool and good relationships to our lives. But every family has their problems, and obviously my family did as well. I think the drinking helped him with coping with life before he found another way to help him things through sobriety. For my mom and father, at the same time, I can't thank them enough for meeting each other and sticking it out through the thick and thin, trying to fix things for themselves and their family. I try not to stress out my mom or the man, my father, Michael Sr., even though I stress out my mom and the man. I can't say enough how much I love them, and it hurts not being able to see them together again like back at home. My father and mom had some really good times together, and that's just from me seeing and being there. The only other things were going left is when I would say she would be concerned about his drinking or whereabouts. They both struggled, and sometimes I don't think they realized it would affect us or not. From my view, every day people were hurt, even if it was a little bit, but they were still worried, pain, and tiredness from the fights. To a point, everybody was trying to leave. I don't want my mom rotting away in prison. In fact, I don't want her sitting in there at all because that's my mom. But she did take my person who I call my father / dad for all my life away from me. To be honest, I couldn't even give you a proper sentencing number because it hurt so much not having either of them. So all I ask in the end is not for her just to sit there for life. I'd like to see her out in the world again one day, hopefully the same person but a recovered one. What I really would like for her to get is to do something with her life instead of prison for life. I would ask for the minimum sentence because she's a good person that struggles but tries to do better than and or fix the problems everyone had. After all, when I was little, she had to help us when we messed up, and all is that I can hope to be there when or if she gets out. Growing up, I thought I'd be the first one sentencing, and it hurt to see my mom going through this on top of everything else, including losing her husband / my father. I love my family, I love my mom, and I love my dad. Thank you.
Next week will be Michael Ricci Jr.
I just want to start off by saying thank you to the court, the jurors, and to you, Your Honor, for discovering the truth of my father's passing. I'm eternally grateful and appreciative for everyone's involvement in finding the truth, and for allowing the truth to happen today. I've been trying to write this impact statement over the last couple days, and I've written about 5 different variations of it, each one longer than the last, but no words on a page can surmise or even begin to describe the amount of anger, pain, confusion, and hurt I've been carrying with me since my father's death. This whole situation sucked. I never thought to imagine that I would have to be testifying on behalf of my father's death, and at the other end of it would be the person I used to call my mom. As I mentioned in my testimony, my dad was still my hero. He's perhaps the most important person in my life. He's the person I looked up to and tried to live my life the way he did. He's an Army veteran, so I wanted to join the military because of him. And as a kid, I would spend the nights with him at the firehouse, so naturally I wanted to join the Boston Fire Department. He was that constant example for me to live my life selflessly, putting others before myself, and to be that helping hand for anyone, and to enjoy the time that I have left and to make the most of it. We also had a very personal relationship as a father and son. We would stay up late together watching TV shows from his childhood, listen to music, and go to concerts together. And he would tell me stories from when he was a kid into his adulthood, life advice that he would tell me to prepare me going into the real world. He was that guy I could always trust and always count on with my life if life was kicking me to the ground. I never thought that having such a special relationship with him meant that I now have to live in a world without him. Having to retell this experience that I went through, the open wounds of pain and anguish over the course of 3 years since my dad was gone, it's been tough. Reliving that night he died, that I was the first family member at the hospital, that I was the first person to know that he died. I can still feel to this day the emotions that I was going through when the hospital staff told me. I couldn't believe what they said. I was just in complete shock. It really felt like someone tore open my heart and there was an emptiness in my body that just made me feel numb. But I knew I had to break the news to everybody else, which I did through disbelief. And I immediately from that point on had to undertake the responsibility for what was to come. I had to plan out his wake and funeral. I had to decide where he was to be buried, what clothes he would be wearing, the casket he would be put to rest in, what was going to be written on his gravestone. I was even with him transporting his body back from Boston Medical to Marshfield with the help of the Boston Fire Department. All the while communicating with DCF to decide where my sister will live and who was to be taking care of her. And I'm thinking to myself, no kid should have to go through anything like this. I'm angry that my fear, the nightmare that would keep me up at 2 in the morning, is the reality I now have to live through of what could have happened if I wasn't there the day I left in 2019. Living through all this, understanding what I was doing and how personal every decision I made gave me a realization, a different kind of pain, a different kind of hurt that no one else, a different kind of pain, a different kind of hurt than anyone else that I am both honored and heartbroken to be carrying with me. However, that feeling of having to go through all that wasn't the difficult part. It was how I saw everyone else that made me feel horrible. The amount of people I saw completely broken, faces covered in tears and sorrow, an endless amount of support who I saw all hurting, friends and family suffering in grief and anger, and that I hugged and consoled, all looking at me as a source of strength, the guy who held back his emotions right through this horrific storm. As a man, I was honored, and it was a privilege to be taking on such a heavy burden in the name of my father. But as a kid who just lost his dad, his best friend, I never felt more lost in that world. Watching everyone grieving, looking to me for guidance, for hope, and I wasn't able to show my grief at my own father's funeral. 3 years later, I've been able to understand and live with grief, but I can't say it's gotten any easier as the time went on. I can't watch the movies without thinking about the story it reminded him of. I can't listen to certain songs without skipping the song entirely because of the song he played when he was cooking dinner. And I can't go to concerts without having to get in my car crying, "You should be there with me." I have to come to terms that the last time I'll ever hear my dad say "I love you" and "I'm proud of you" will be in my head from when I saw him a week before he died. What hurts me the most is that my sister got her childhood robbed from her. Her innocence isn't a privilege anymore that she gets to live through. She now has to live with not having one last hug from him, that he wasn't there to see her graduate high school, that he won't be able to walk with her down the aisle on her wedding day, that she won't have the feeling of being daddy's little princess anymore. That hurts me more than anything else. And the infuriates me that at 17 years old, she has to call 911 about her father lying unresponsive in front of her, and she now has to live with that the entire life to haunt her. I carry with me a sense of guilt every day that I didn't do all I could as an older brother to never have her anywhere close to that kind of situation. I run so many scenarios in my head of what I could have done to prevent her from being in that position, but I feel like I failed her and I failed myself because of it. I want to emphasize that I don't hate the person I called my mom. I will always love her, but the person who took my father's life showed me she wasn't there. I had to come to terms with that. She's gone, and that person she's now is someone else. I had to separate myself from in order to live my own life. It broke my heart to me, that both my parents are now gone. I don't know if I can forgive Christine. She took one of the most important people in my life, but I know that God and my dad would want revenge in my heart. I pray that she creates a relationship with Jesus Christ and to better herself and to take accountability for what she did so we can all heal. We have years of healing that we have to do, somehow find a sense of normalcy and become a family again. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of tears and perseverance, but we have to do it alone between me and my siblings. So to you, Your Honor, after hearing us speak today, hearing everyone's testimony during trial, and your thoughts on the case as a whole, only God can decide what is a fair and just punishment, but I know that you will reflect on what is a fair and just punishment as well. I want to thank everyone again for the due diligence and for allowing me to speak today. Nothing will ever bring back my father. He lives with us, but he lives with us in our hearts. I know my father, as well as other people, will cherish to know that we will not fall victim to this for our past, but we will live as survivors together as a family. Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm not sure what the right words are or where to even begin when talking about this, but I guess I will start with what it was like to lose my dad. Losing my dad was what, if not the hardest, if not the hardest, one of the hardest and most painful things I think I'll ever experience. Having to face the fact I will never get the chance to have a simple conversation with my dad, down to him not being there at my graduation or any other milestones I would make was heartbreaking. Having to look past endless lives we would go on, singing these favorite songs from when he was a kid and all the small, beloved memories I have to think about. Every day to try and get anything close to the feeling I felt being with my dad is impossible. What made things harder than anyone could imagine was having to accept that the person who I wanted to confide in the most and who I wanted to make everything better was the person everyone was holding accountable for my pain. I felt bad missing my mom because I knew what she had done was bad, and I knew there was no way I would or could minimize the harmful emotion, charged actions she took, and the decision she made that night. It made me angry with her for a while because, again, I wanted her to comfort, and she was the reason I couldn't have that. However, again, I just wanted to take this moment to reiterate that in no way do I think what my mom did was anywhere near okay. In fact, again, it was the most worst experience I've ever been through. Regardless, though, I do know that my mom and my dad had and have so much love for me and my siblings, and I know they had a mountainous love for each other. No one saw them every day like I did, and I don't blame anyone for that. But the only thing I can do is miss my dad and miss my mom until I get the opportunity to hopefully see them again. I'll never forget the severity of my mom's actions, but I will forgive her because she's my mom and I'll always love her as she has me. Most importantly, I will never forget my dad, who did everything he did for his family and friends. So as I near the end of this statement, all I can truly say is I just want my family back together, as much as I can have, and I want more than anything for us to heal together. So, Your Honor, I ask you with every inch of my heart for you to keep my mother's relationship with her kids and the endless love she has shown us in your mind as you make a decision on her sentencing. Thank you.
Excuse me, we would next call Mr. and Mrs. Ricci.
Is it okay if she has, can I have my friend?
Yes, you can go right up here.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
To Your Honor, Judge Frenier, thank you for giving my husband and I the opportunity to voice our sadness, the sadness our family has suffered since the loss of our son, Michael Ricci. The defendant, Christine, has been guilty of taking our son away from his family and friends long before she stabbed him in the heart. Our family has lost so many wonderful family events, gatherings. Without our son, Michael, our grandchildren have lost so many wonderful, special moments without their dad, all due to the defendant's manipulation, alienation, and control. She was so possessive over our son, Michael. The defendant took away his voice, his wonderful life. We wish we could have asked him to take away the Ricci name, last name from her, as she does not deserve the honor. However, we cannot. We ask that you impose the maximum of 25 years on this second-degree murder charge and the maximum sentence on the assault and battery with a dangerous weapon to be served after the sentence for the murder is complete. I'm sorry. We feel she does not deserve any less. She took our son's life. She took our children's brother. She took our grandchildren's father away from them, and on and on. Why should she have freedom? He did not. She took such a great man with a warm heart for so many beautiful people. And thank you so much for letting me express this to you. And I'm done. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
thank you very much.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I will be reading the next impact statement by Donna Ricci LaValle. And Donna is Michael Ricci Jr.'s sister, one of his many siblings. And this is her words. I understand the point of a victim impact statement, but I don't understand quite how to convey the impact. I lost my brother Michael at the hands of his wife. He is no longer here to live a life he so deserves to live. No one has the right to take that away from anyone. She not only took his life, but tortured him and their children with no regard for anyone but herself. Michael was a kind, sweet man, a hardworking, responsible man, a loving and caring man. He never would have left his children in harm's way, which is why he didn't leave. He feared for his children's safety. Michael is 2 years younger than me. Me, my brother Billy, and Michael used to hang out a lot when growing up. Even as young adults, we'd go to the same friends' gatherings together. We were very, very close. In fact, he's the godfather to my daughter, Jessica. We laughed a lot. My brothers always watched out for me. Michael, being my little brother, still made sure I was always okay. The loss of my brother is heart-wrenching. My poor parents have been suffering through pretrial hearings, a lot of which the jury was unable to hear, but my parents did, sitting in the courtroom, time after time, torture after torture. Me and my brothers and sisters did. Billy, mostly in court. Diana, Paul, Anthony, and myself on Zoom. We had to appoint a family contact person to communicate all pretrial information, dates, and Zoom sign-in information. We as a family had to do something that she caused. No family should ever have to adjust their lives because the person decides they can take someone else's life. Taking days off work, having to disclose personal family information to our bosses and coworkers as to why we need to Zoom a murder trial. Her sick torture continued through the rest of my family even after she took Michael from us. On Friday, August 2nd, 2024, her control and torture to our family ended with the rightful verdict of guilty. We, the Ricci family, can begin to heal. I respectfully ask Your Honor to impose the maximum sentencing allowed with the said verdict and show no leniency as she did not to my brother and their children. I hope she never sees freedom in her lifetime. And next we have Diana Ricci. I think I might be reading her statement as well. And she had also put together a little collage of pictures that she wanted Your Honor to take a look at. And Diana Ricci, Your Honor, is another sister of Michael Ricci Jr. All of these people are in the courtroom, but some of them did not feel very comfortable reading the statement. So again, with Your Honor's permission, if I could read her statement to the court.
Just 1 minute, I want to.
Yes, absolutely.
Of course,
Thank you.
I'll allow you to read it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Your Honor, it's extremely difficult to put into words exactly how my brother's murder has impacted me, so I will go with what I do know. I do know that since the day I met the defendant, she was controlling, vindictive, hateful, and cruel. She viewed my brother as an object and not as the sensitive, loving person he was. The defendant's goals were to control him, and she ultimately did until he started to break away from her evil grips, but by that time it was unfortunately too late. The defendant took away a beautiful life. Michael was a selfless man whose livelihood was saving other people's lives. Taking my brother's life was not her right to do. Abusing my brother was not her right, nor was tormenting him, not for any reason. From day one, I could never understand just who the defendant thought she was and what gave her that right. But this is no longer the defendant's call. Her fate lies in one place and one place only, and that is in the hands of our honorable judge. Her honor will determine the fate of the defendant. That is why I am here to ask that her honor impose the maximum sentence on the defendant for the gross murder of my brother Michael, because the thought of the defendant ever walking the streets as a free person sends fear and chills down his spine. The defendant is an extremely dangerous and sick individual who is a threat to society, period. Thank you for your time listening. I love you, brother. We miss you terribly. And it's Diana Ricci. And the next speaker will be Paul Ricci, and he'll be reading his statement.
Hi. So I guess this is a view from up here. Okay, interesting. Thank you for allowing us to speak. Obviously, I'll just introduce myself. It's Michael Sr. We're all the siblings of Michael Sr. He is my brother. I don't use was. As we said, we are seeking the maximum penalty for the fact that he was killed and the murderer was convicted. I obviously don't have to tell you that, but I just... So since that evening, the horrible night that he was killed, that the whole family, pretty much, a piece of us, died with him. I have a lot of concern about my parents as well. They say, when a parent has to lose their son or daughter, it's just the most, the worst thing in the world. I'm not a parent, so I don't know that. But to have the child taken by murder, it just must be gut-wrenching. Well, I know it's gut-wrenching to my parents. I could just tell 3 years, this is what we've been living with. My mother and father have been nothing but crying for these past 3 years. It's like we'll never be at peace as a family. It's hard to be a whole family again anyway. For example, Thanksgiving, Christmas, family gatherings, they'll never be the same. They always sort of an empty chair, However, knowing that justice was served and knowing that Michael's murderer will be in prison is somewhat of a consolation. My thoughts and prayers, of course, are obviously with my family, her children. Of course, there's no doubt that everybody lost. Everybody lost. No one, everybody lost. I'd also like to point out that, people are able to have visitors in prison, but to visit Michael, we have to go to church and look at his gravestone. I think about that, or at least that's how I'm looking at it, how I feel. If I was confident, and I don't want to talk bad, but if I was confident that she had, or she is capable of showing remorse, I would tend to say, please be lenient. But I think just the family knows, as a family, we know that it's not something that the accused is able to do. And I think that a reality check behind bars might show, that maybe she could obtain accountability at that point for the murder. Time behind in prison. I never want to see anybody go through this. What I had to see with my siblings, with my parents, it's just, I don't wish that on anybody. I will obviously be praying for the kids and even the accused. But it's just the fact that the hurt that has just been going on in our family, it's a lot. So the reason I will pray, I will mention that, of course, our parents raised us with Christian values. Of course, Michael, they raised with Christian values. Donna, Diana, Billy, Anthony, and myself. All Michael's siblings, of course. I know you know this, but I thank you. It's very important that I get to address the court so that the accused can hear how she tore our hearts and consequently put a knife in one of them. So if I reflect on that night, I just would like some closure for my parents and my siblings, and I believe the court can make this happen. I do thank Your Honor. I do thank the gentleman bailiff for their assistance. I do thank the Commonwealth for all that they've done to make us comfortable. I have a little bit of an issue with hearing, so it's been very good. So, that being said, if I never hear the word sidebar or objection again, it will be too soon. God be with you all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
There's one last one, Your Honor, and that's William Ricci, another sibling.
Your Honorable Judge, as I wrote this impact statement, I thought to myself, is this what has become of my brother's life? 52 years later, I would be sitting in a courtroom, giving a statement at his murder trial. I thought to myself, how tragic. I can recall growing up with my brother Michael, which were some of the best times of my life. We laughed a lot, we cried a lot, we shared a lot of memories together. I remember when he joined the Army, we had a going away party for him with family and friends. We were so proud of him. When he came home, he decided to take the police and fire exam. I remember the day he received the acceptance letter in the mail from the Boston Fire Department. I remember hugging him, and I remember him telling me, I'm going to wait for the police acceptance letter. And I said to him, Michael, no you're not. You don't have the personality to be a police officer. You're a firefighter. Then Michael met the defendant. When Michael married the defendant, it was apparent to my family right away that there was something wrong with you. As the years went on, we learned you poisoned the minds of relatives and your own children with lies, manipulating them into thinking we were an evil family. And for 15 years, you isolated Michael from his mother, his father, along with his siblings. We missed birthdays, holidays, special occasions with my brother and his children. We would later find out at Michael's funeral that you went even as far as isolating him from your own father and sisters for 3 years before murdering my brother. Because of your one narcissistic, selfish act of violence, you have caused so much pain and heartache to a lot of people. However, I believe only good will come out of this. The Bible says what Satan intended for evil, God intended for good. When I thought all hope was gone and I would never see my brother again, I received a text message from Michael in June of 2019 stating, "Hey Billy, this is my new number, brother. Love you." I remember being so excited and replying within seconds, "Awesome, let's get together soon." During the next couple of years, I would share some special moments with my brother. I attended some AA meetings, some AA softball games, a couple of cookouts in the backyard, and a card game at my house. Last time I would see my brother in person would be on November 13th, 2020. I remember walking him out to my driveway and saying, "Promise me we will go out for coffee and talk." Little did I know, those words would be the last words I would say to my brother. I would receive a final text on January 17th, 2021 from my brother Michael. That read, "Hey brother, just checking in to say hi and love you. Happy belated birthday also." I replied, "I love you too. Happy belated birthday to you as well. Let's get together soon." On January 28th, 2021, I would see my brother for the last time watching the news with the headline saying, 23-year-old veteran of the Boston Fire Department was murdered in his Marshfield home. We were in utter shock and dismay. Our family did not expect to wake up that morning and have our loved one taken away from us so suddenly and in such a horrific way. They say a man's castle is his home. Unfortunately, because of your abuse and control, my brother was a prisoner in his own home. Defendant, prison will now be your home. And like my brother, you will be a prisoner in your own home. I would like to share with you a quote from a picture frame that hung in your bedroom above your bed. "For I know the plans I have for you, to give you a hope in the future." Jeremiah 29:11. It's only by the grace of God that I have to learn to forgive you for what you've done to my brother Michael. I believe Michael put his faith and trust in Jesus Christ, and my hope is I will see him in heaven someday. Over these last 3.5 years and during the trial, it was apparent to us that you have shown no remorse, nor taken any accountability for murdering Michael, confirming what we have always believed about you, that there was something wrong with you. I pray you would repent and ask for forgiveness, not only for violently taking the life of our loved one, but also destroying the lives of your own children
Shame on you. Michael, Angel, Sophia, I am so sorry for all the physical and verbal abuse you suffered at the hand of the defendant. I am so sorry that the defendant became so selfishly enraged, murdering your father and taking your hero away. Everyone in that home saved the defendant's life when she attempted suicide. And then she turned around and took the life of the very person who saved her. My family and I will never understand why such an abusive, violent person like you was allowed to continue to live in that home and eventually murder a loved one. My brother was a gentle soul, loving, kind, self-sacrificing hero who loved life. There was nothing my brother neither did nor could have done for you that gave you the right to murder him and take his life from us. There isn't a minute that doesn't go by that I don't think about my brother Michael. And as long as I'm alive, this impact statement will not be the end of my brother's story. I will speak the truth in love, and Michael's story will be told. The Bible says God is a merciful God, but he's also a just God. The voice of my brother's blood has cried out to God from the ground. The jury has spoken, wherein the defendant was charged in the crime of murder in the second degree. The defendant was found guilty. I ask Your Honor for the strictest penalty. Wherein the defendant was charged in the crime of assault and a battery with a deadly weapon, the defendant was found guilty. I ask Your Honor for the strictest penalty. There is only one hope for the defendant now. That is Jesus Christ. May God have mercy on your soul. Thank you.
Very briefly, Your Honor, I believe that concludes the impact statements. As you saw from our submission of our sentencing, our proposed sentencing recommendation, the Commonwealth is looking for the maximum sentence of life in prison with only the possibility of parole after 25 years. We're also asking for from and after time in the assault, battery, dangerous weapon to with a knife of 8 to 10 years. Your Honor, I don't need to tell you, you sat here every day and paid attention closely to all of the evidence and all of the witnesses and all of the exhibits. But very briefly, this was a case about loss and about choices. There was a loss of a father, a son, a sibling, a friend, a coworker, and a beautiful person who was a hero to so many. This is an immeasurable loss, and a loss that no amount of time, truthfully, will right the wrong, will fix the pain, or will bring Michael Ricci Jr. back here. As I said, this case is also about choices. There were so many choices this defendant had, but opted to choose the worst possible choice of terminating the life of the man she loved more than anything, thereby robbing those who also loved him of having any more memories to create with him. She chose to stay after the affair. She chose to stay after all this apparent drinking that was testified to. She also chose each and every time she picked up her hand and struck him about his face. She chose to pick up a knife on January 28, 2021, while her 16-year-old daughter was upstairs. She chose to bring up the affair at every possible chance she could get. But on January 28, 2021, she made the ultimate choice that landed her here. And that was the choice to take Michael Ricci Jr.'s life forever. She has shown zero remorse, zero accountability in all the time leading up to the time she stole his life, stabbing him in the heart, in the back, with the very knives he took away from her to protect her, as William Ricci stated. I don't think there's much more the Commonwealth can say that the family hasn't said best. And as a result, Your Honor, we would ask that you rely both on what was said by his friends and loved ones, and also by the legacy he left, and by the damage this defendant has done forever. And we ask that you impose the maximum sentence, as earlier stated, and as memorialized in our sentencing recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm asking this court to impose a 15-year parole eligibility on Ms. Ricci for count 1, and a 5-year and a day sentence on count 2, currently to count 1. I want to just say that if it wasn't clear from the testimony of the Ricci children, they joined me in that recommendation as per a statement that I received from their attorney. And we are also aware that the ADA is aware that all 3 children are suggesting or are recommending to the court parole eligibility at 15 years, the earliest possible recommendation. Now, the Commonwealth acknowledges 2 of the 4 considerations in their sentencing memo that are appropriate to the determination of sentences in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, namely general deterrence and retribution. The court should also consider specific deterrence and the possibility for rehabilitation, but I will start with the 2 considerations that are foremost in the Commonwealth's memo, because I think when considered in context, they actually cut in the opposite direction as the one suggested in the Commonwealth's memo. With regard to general deterrence, and with regard to punishment and retribution, the Commonwealth is already achieving what they wish to gain with the statutory life sentence. Ms. Ricci has never been to prison. Before this case, Ms. Ricci had never been to jail. The reality of spending a decade and a half, at the very least, in prison, followed by the strictest of strict lifetime parole, is hardly letting Ms. Ricci off the hook. The parole eligibility of 15 years, in fact, is simply consistent with the idea of giving Ms. Ricci some hope for rehabilitation, and changes nothing at all with regard to the sentence that she's facing, which is, statutorily, the longest sentence available under the criminal law. The 15 years is also consistent with the jury's verdict and is appropriate given that she is someone who has never been convicted of a crime, and as you can see from the mitigation report, suffers from a complex history of trauma and mood disorders. With regard to general deterrence, the idea that a life sentence would not sufficiently disincentivize the public against a similar crime in a case where Ms. Ricci saw parole at 15 years is not reasonable. A life sentence, again, is still the most serious sentence we impose in the Commonwealth, and parole eligibility at 15 years does not change that in any functional sense. To the extent that we believe that the public considers the length of sentence in determining whether they should commit a crime, it's the length of the sentence which is a deterrent, and here that is like a life sentence. The possibility of parole is only a possibility, it's not a guarantee, and even under these circumstances, this penalty is an intimidating and scary sentence which fulfills the proposed, and is sufficiently intimidating to have that general deterrent effect that the Commonwealth mentions. With regard to specific deterrence, the 15-year parole eligibility is the most favorable sentence for encouraging Ms. Ricci to make the changes necessary to heal herself and to come to terms and to make real change. While the circumstances of this case make the recurrence of such a crime in the future highly unlikely for Ms. Ricci, and those circumstances are the serious nature of the sentence, the fact that this was a crime without premeditation, that her age upon release, and the context of marital discord, which is unlikely to repeat itself in the future, there is no question but that this life sentence, which is a significant and daunting sentence, sufficient to chasten the defendant, is sufficient to create specific deterrence. But with regard to rehabilitation, we see from Wendy Carlson's report that Ms. Ricci is not a monster. She's a human being who has a discrete set of psychological problems which can be addressed by anyone who has the motivation to address them. Prior to 2018, Ms. Ricci was living a stable life as a contributing law-abiding member of society who worked, took care of her family, and had a relatively conflict-free marriage. The downward spiral that was described during this trial from 2018 to 2021 obviously had deeper roots in previous childhood trauma and trauma from previous relationships, and certainly the issues are real. I'm not trying to undersell them, but they are repairable. But it's going to take the motivation of Ms. Ricci to make those changes, and giving her the opportunity, at least to have the opportunity to make changes, an opportunity for some hope for freedom, is the greatest ability that this court has to make sure that she remains motivated to make the changes necessary to rehabilitate herself, which is a compelling interest that this state should have when it sentences someone. Now, I think that I want to address a couple things that were said during the Commonwealth's argument for sentencing that I think under the circumstances are somewhat unfair. The Commonwealth argues that the defendant has not taken responsibility for her actions in this case. I think that is incorrect. The evidence showed that after 2018, Ms. Ricci was in therapy, was in marriage counseling, was going to Al-Anon, and was helping to support Michael in Alcoholics Anonymous. Clearly was prescribed medication, was compliant to the medication. There's no question but that she was taking responsibility for at least her portion of the extent to which her mental health issues were affecting the toxicity of that relationship. After being charged, there was no opportunity to take responsibility. It sounds a lot like the Commonwealth is asking the court to hold it against her that she went to trial. And while there should never be a penalty for exercising the right to trial, the suggestion is even more off base in the context of a first-degree murder charge without a meaningful offer of breakdown. If what she is being accused of is not making some sort of public apology during the course of the case or afterwards, this court must recognize the difficult position that she has been placed in doing so, given the fact that she's been represented by counsel and has had real legal consequences that attach to any such statement. In short, this argument is deeply unfair. The Commonwealth also argues that The prior bad act evidence suggests that the murder existed in the context of constant progressive abuse. The truth is that from the evidence, we don't know what the jury found with regard to these acts. It is also not entirely clear from the evidence how many events we are talking about. There was one event that seems to have been attested to by multiple witnesses that took place at the end of 2018 or beginning of 2019. Beyond that, everything else is unclear. The vast majority of the prior bad act evidence that was from the period from 2019 until 2021 was about my client's suicide attempts, of which I very much include the two June 6, 2019 knife-related events. The Commonwealth cannot make the case from this sparse record that the abuse was consistent and progressive until the ultimate event, as they suggest in the sentencing memorandum. Also, the Commonwealth argues that Ms. Ricci was always the instigator and exclusively the violent one in their sentencing memorandum. That contention, what could not possibly be established by the evidence, and although not part of the trial evidence here, there exists at least one reference that seems to contradict that contention in records that Your Honor reviewed. Now, I'm not asking the court to find that statement credible or even to rely on it in this sentencing, but cite it only to discourage this court from blindly accepting that the Commonwealth's contrary contention is beyond question. This conviction has a range of parole eligibility dates, which gives the court discretion to tailor the sentence to the specific defendant and to the specific circumstances of this crime. The statutory scheme, which creates a maximum penalty of a 25-year parole eligibility, should, by logical extension, be reserved for the worst offenders that are charged with this crime. The court is no stranger to these cases. They come before us almost every day. They involve a situation where someone comes in a multi-page record extending back to their juvenile days, having an adult record which acts of progressive violence leading up to the ultimate conviction. After the arrest, a history of violent encounters within the incarcerative sentence that suggests that the violent actions of a person being sentenced are so baked in that it requires a longer waiting period before they see parole. Ms. Ricci is not that offender, she is not that defendant. In fact, all of the penal justification theories discussed earlier all argue in favor of the earliest possible parole eligibility. She has no criminal history, she has a demonstrated high motivation to get better, both before she was incarcerated as well as what you saw reported in Wendy Carlson's report. There are just a number of courses that she's taken all on her own initiative. I have received additional documentation that suggests that just since 2024 alone, the beginning of 2024 alone, Ms. Ricci has completed 46 courses at the House of Correction while awaiting trial, all of them related to mental health, well-being, trying to address her issues to the extent that she can. The unique circumstances of this case suggest that it existed at a time and in a context which are completely unlikely to recur. All of these things taken together suggest that a 15-year parole eligibility is warranted, and it's hard to imagine a defendant coming before the court with less criminal history and more deserving of the possibility of at least seeing the board at 15 years. The Commonwealth sentencing request seeks to treat Christine Ricci as harshly as the statute allows, as the most serious offender that the statute contemplates. They suggest not only the latest parole eligibility date, they also seek the maximum sentence on and after for a charge that was part of the same transaction or occurrence as the underlying murder. Under the Commonwealth sentencing scheme, Ms. Ricci would not receive parole until she was 81. That would be the earliest moment that she could be released from prison. That is the functional equivalent of a first-degree murder conviction, and is not appropriate given the verdict, given the circumstances of this crime, and given our values, and given this particular defendant. For these reasons, I ask for 15-year parole eligibility, and I ask for concurrent time between the murder and the assault battery dangerous weapon. Thank you.
Attorney Wood, does the defendant wish to allocate?
No, Your Honor.
I'll take a brief recess and I'll be out in a minute. Appropriate sentence. That responsibility becomes even more difficult where, as here, the conduct of the defendant has caused such a senseless, tragic result. The loss of an innocent man, Michael Ricci Sr., and the devastating impact on his family and loss to the community. As with any sentencing decision, I carefully assess the information before me in light of the sentencing goals, those being punishment, deterrence, protection of the public, and rehabilitation. In making this assessment, I've considered the severity of the offense, the recommendations by the Commonwealth and by Ms. Ricci's attorneys, the victim impact statements of the 3 Ricci children, Sophia, Angel, and Michael Jr., the impact statements, both read and presented by the deceased's mother and his siblings. I've reviewed and considered the mitigation report prepared by Wendy Carlson. I have considered the defendant's criminal history, which entirely relates to her criminal conduct at Janine Bouchard's home in March 2020. Approximately 1 month prior to killing Michael Sr., the defendant took a continued without finding to charges of disturbing the peace and trespassing. She was serving her 6-month probationary sentence at the time she stabbed Michael Sr. to death. I have also considered the governing laws and the sentencing guidelines. In Massachusetts, a person convicted of second-degree murder is sentenced to life in state prison, but is eligible for parole after 15 to 25 years. In addition, as to her conviction for assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, the defendant faces a sentence of no more than 10 years in state prison or 2.5 in the House of Correction. The presumptive range of sentencing under the Massachusetts sentencing guidelines for the assault and battery with a dangerous weapon charge here, indictment 02, is 40 to 60 months. It is the responsibility of this court to consult my conscience and to exercise sound judicial discretion in order to punish the defendant justly. Judicial discretion does not permit the court to assign a value to a victim's life because the value of every human life is incalculable. Judicial discretion does not permit the court to act impulsively or to satisfy any personal or public desire for vengeance. I have considered the life of a beautiful, humble man, a loving father, a veteran of the United States Army, the cook of the house, beloved by his family, a compassionate and kind man who, as a Boston firefighter, selflessly and courageously dedicated his professional life to helping those in the direst of circumstances. That life was taken by his own wife, Christine Ricci. The written and oral impact statements made by Michael Ricci Sr.'s family portray the enormous loss, the sense of grief and anger that has resulted from his tragic death at the hands of his own wife. I am sure that nothing I will say and no sentence I can impose will lessen the grief or the loss that Michael Ricci Sr.'s family feels today and will continue to endure in the future. Michael Ricci Sr.'s siblings and his mother understandably asked this court to punish the defendant to the fullest extent allowed by the law. While respectful of their feelings, I am also mindful that this court should not and will not impose a sentence based on emotion. I recognize also that there are innocent family members of Christine and Michael Ricci, notably, but not exclusively, their 3 children, Angel, Michael Jr., and Sophia, whose lives have been entirely torn apart by their mother's senseless acts of violence on January 28, 2021. I want to say to the Ricci children, release any guilt that you carry with you as you move forward. You are not responsible for what your mother did. In determining how to exercise my discretion, as I said, I'm guided by those goals in sentencing: punishment, deterrence, protection of the public, and rehabilitation. The law mandates that I sentence the defendant to a term not more than is necessary to effectuate the goals of sentencing. I've considered the nature and circumstances of the offense, the conduct and character of the defendant, that the defendant was serving a probationary sentence at the time she killed her husband, as well as the nature and degree of physical harm caused to Michael Ricci Sr. as so-called all aggravating circumstances. With respect to the character of the defendant, I note that the uncharged conduct, some of which was evidence admitted at trial, and other uncharged conduct that was not admitted as trial, because the court determined that its probative value was outweighed by its prejudicial effect. I specifically am not punishing Ms. Ricci for that uncharged conduct. Rather, I consider reports of her prior assaults on Michael Ricci Sr. are sufficiently reliable and bear on the defendant's character and her amenability to rehabilitation. While I credit that Ms. Ricci suffered trauma in her own early life, there is simply no justification for the cycle of escalating abuse and violence she perpetuated against her husband both inside and outside of the Ricci home. Thus, the court has a genuine need to craft a sentence that's designed to protect the public, particularly here, where there is no expression of remorse. Because it was mentioned in the defendant's oral argument on sentencing, I specifically state I am not punishing the defendant for her decision to go to trial. That decision is her constitutional right, and it would be highly inappropriate under the law for me to punish her more harshly for that decision. A significant period of incarceration in state prison will help in the rehabilitation of Ms. Ricci and deter her from any future misconduct by forcing her to consider what she did and to appreciate the gravity of her senseless acts. The sentence is also designed to foster the societal need for meaningful punishment for an individual who intentionally killed her husband. Punishment is the mechanism we use to enforce our societal standards, chief among them, the protection of human life and personal safety. Finally, Ms. Ricci's period of incarceration will, for many years, protect the public from her unlawful behavior. Ms. Ricci, you may stand. Ms. Ricci, within your own soul, you will live with the guilt and burden of Michael Ricci Sr.'s death for the rest of your life. I sentence you on count 002, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, to no less than 6 years, no more than 6 years in 1 day. Upon completion of that sentence, I sentence you on indictment 001 to a sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole in 20 years. Madam Clerk, you may impose the sentence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Ricci, on docket number 2183CR00153, on offense number 002, the court sentences you to be incarcerated at the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Susan Baranowski for the term of not less than 6 years, but not more than 6 years in 1 day. On offense number 002, the court sentences you to be incarcerated at the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Susan Baranowski for the term of life with the possibility of parole after 20 years. This sentence is to run from and after the sentence imposed on offense number 002. Ms. Ricci, you'll be credited with time spent while incarcerated while waiting disposition this matter. That number will be 1,301 days. I must advise you of your right to appeal under Superior Court Rule 65. If you wish to do so, you must do so in writing within 30 days. And I must also advise you of your right to appeal your sentence under Superior Court Rule 64. If you choose to do so, you must do so in writing within 10 days. The court assesses the following fees. There's a $110 DNA fee, a $150 counsel fee that was previously assessed, and a $9 victim witness fee. You stand committed.
I would ask that those fees be remitted under circumstances.
I will remit them all except for the victim witness fee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Court, all rise.